French farmers are dumping manure onto government buildings and onto the roads. They are turning freeways into fields and setting them on fire. They are sending a message out to the people that government-decreed starvation is coming. And it's not just the French. It's happening in Germany, Greece, Spain, Belgium, Italy, and Ireland. And it looks like it's just getting started.
Farming needs to stop. That's the single biggest driver of climate change.
Climate change. All of this is simultaneously happening while the American agricultural industry is being directly attacked, that the emissions from cows, both in the dairy and the meat industry, are destroying the environment.
Imagine a government that cares so much about us and about the climate that they're willing to destroy the food supply and starve us to death.
Another food processing plant fire happened yesterday in Montebello, California. California has experienced its share of devastating processing plant fires.
This shows the alarming rates of fires at manufacturing plants, grocery stores, food pantries, farms, and grain factories. It's likely that over 100 of these fires have taken place just this year.
The war against the farmers has nothing to do with just taxing diesel to reduce emissions. Most people already know that climate change is a power grab. What they really want is to take over the land, control the food supply, and make us dependent on disgusting GMO, made in a lab, cancerous food that Bill Gates and all these other puppets wants to shove down our throats. And that's why farmers from across Europe are revolting, and rightfully so. Meanwhile, the rotten media are barely talking about it while demonizing the farmers the same way they demonized the truckers during the Freedom Convoy. Their mandate is to make hard-working, blue-collar, patriotic workers look like the enemy.
But when you've got well over a dozen food processing plants and warehouses getting destroyed or seriously damaged over just the last few weeks, at a time when the food supply is already vulnerable, it's obviously suspicious, and it could lead to serious food shortages. That's why some folks are now wondering, well, number one, what's going on? And you've got some people speculating that this might be an intentional way to disrupt the food supply.
There's been all these crazy fires, like an inordinate amount of fires at these food processing plants, and it genuinely has been happening a lot. Fires and accidents happen at factories all the time. It is highly irregular that you have this many fires happening.
There have been confirmed over a dozen disabling accidents at food plants in the last month, over a dozen.
They're going to carry out the forced depopulation of 90% of us, and their time frame is 2030, and they have their surrogates all over the news telling us that it's the end of the world as we know it, and that it's our fault that all the systems are breaking down, while they deliberately go down the line, turning the civilization infrastructure off in front of us.
After that, we've got to stabilize the population. When I was born, there were
so what's wrong with the population? I mean,
with too many people. That's why we have global warming. We have global warming because too many people are using too much stuff. But if there were less people, they'd be using less stuff.
And so we set an ambitious goal to cut our greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030, and to reach net zero emissions. The investment we are announcing today will help us to achieve these goals, and it will do so much more. Think about the impact on something like public health. When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
What should be done about population?
For a long time, it was considered politically incorrect to even mention it, and most of the big conservation organizations refused to mention it. Without causing any pain or suffering, reduce the number of people on the planet. Reduce the number of people on the planet, because there's too many of us. And then the third is the opulent lifestyle of the rest of us.
That's us in the West?
Yes.
What are we doing wrong?
Well, we Don't we all have far more than we need? Far more than we need.
The Wildlands Project is a very well-funded effort to lock up as much as 50% of the United States in the wilderness. It is heavily promoted by most environmental, non-governmental organizations. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, helped create it in the mid-1980s to be the foundation of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, which the IUCN wrote in 1982. The IUCN is an international group of over 1,000 NGO and government members.
Take a look at the Wildlands map. It defines where environmentalists want to take America in the very near future. The areas in red will be off-limits to humans. The areas in yellow represent buffer zones, where limited use is allowed primarily to travel to and from populated areas. The areas in green are where normal use by humans will be allowed. However, by the environmentalists' own admission, these normal use areas would be restricted.
And the claim that there are too many people on the planet is an anti-truth. So, people say, well, you have to accept limits to growth and et cetera. It's like, I have to accept the limits that you're going to impose on me because you're frightened of the future. That's your theory, is it? Okay.
I have no doubt that the fundamental source of all our problems, particularly our environmental problems, is population growth. I can't think of a single problem that wouldn't be easier to solve if there were less people.
No. I'm talking about literally a woman cannot get another woman pregnant. A man cannot get a man pregnant. A man does not have a womb. Let's knock it off. Let's be serious about this. What kind of government would encourage such a thing? A government that wants to get rid of you, but wants to get rid of you in a way where you will accept it.
Always. All the religious groups are against me because I'm talking about population. They want more souls. I want less on the planet.
It was considered politically incorrect to mention it, and I was determined to mention it. I decided to call it voluntary population optimization. So by the time people worked it out.
I hope that it can occur in a civil way.
Depopulation. Does that sound like some sort of wild conspiracy theory to you?
I would like to reduce the number of people on the planet because there's too many of us.
That was Jane Goodall. She works with the World Economic Forum. She got a knighthood and all sorts of awards for her humanitarian work. And you know who else received the knighthood? Jimmy Savile. Let's keep going.
The world today has 6.8 billion people. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
That was Bill Gates, also a regular of the World Economic Forum. They gave him the Medal of Freedom, and he's also a doctor now, and he wants to inoculate the entire planet. Let's just be honest with each other. These people want to get rid of us, enslave the strong ones, and remove the useless eaters.